Have you ever had a memory that feels so solid, so real that you could reach out and touch it? A favorite street corner, the taste of your grandmother's cooking, the sound of a festival. Now imagine being told that the world that created that memory is vanishing, not in a sudden cataclysm, but slowly, quietly, like an image fading in our memories. For an entire country, this is their reality. For decades, we've looked to Japan to see the future. The neon glow of a Tokyo skyline, bullet trains slicing through the countryside, revolutionary robotics. It has always felt like a nation living one step ahead of the rest of us. But the future that Japan is showing us now is a world where the forces of modernity are creating abandoned towns and a road leading to human non-existence. The Japan we once knew, the one that defined a century of innovation and culture, is disappearing. The heartbeat of any nation is its people, and Japan's heartbeat is growing fainter. In 2024, the number of births fell for the ninth consecutive year, dropping to a shockingly low 686,000 births. This isn't just a new low, it's a number that defies all predictions. The government's own research at the National Institute of Population and Social Security Research didn't expect births to fall below 700,000 until the year 2038. The future has essentially arrived 14 years ahead of schedule, and it's a future with fewer and fewer Japanese people. And Japan is ultimately walking down a road that, if it is not reversed, means the end of the country's very existence. The core of this crisis is the fertility rate. A woman needs 2.1 children to keep a population stable. Japan's fertility rate in 2024 hit a new record low of 1.15 and has been falling for 9 straight years. In Tokyo, a megacity of over 14 million people, the rate has fallen below 1 for the second year in a row, sitting at a staggeringly low 0.96. And this isn't a new problem, but it's accelerating at a terrifying speed. The country's population has been in decline for 14 consecutive years. After peaking in 2008, the population is sitting around 123 million, a drop of 650,000 people in a single year. In a way, it feels like watching a slow motion collapse, a nation quietly hollowing itself out. In fact, for 20 straight years, more people have died in Japan than have been born, with Japan crossing the demographic death cross in 2005. So what does this look like on the ground? It looks like a country getting older and fast. Other than a few tiny nations with a few thousand people, Japan has the highest median age in the world at 49.8 as of 2025. Nearly 1 in 3 people, a staggering 30% of the population, is now over 65, a record high, and those over 75 now make up more than 15% of the entire country, meaning a huge portion of the population has exited their prime working years. This aging crisis creates a cascade of problems that are becoming impossible to ignore. Japan now faces a projected shortfall of over 11 million workers by 2040, creating a labor vacuum that threatens its entire economy. And socially, it's leading to a phenomenon like Akiya, or abandoned ghost homes, with the number of vacant properties already over 9 million. This intense aging warps the country's population pyramid into a shape that is dangerously top-heavy. Think of a pyramid balancing precariously on its point. Today, there are already more than twice as many people over the age of 65 as there are under 15. But the future is where it gets truly surreal. Projections show that by 2070, Japan will have more people over the age of 80 than it will have children under 15. This demographic imbalance puts immense strain on its economy and social systems. The working age population, those between 15 and 64, is expected to fall from over 87 million in 1995 to a projected 44 million by 2060. That means fewer workers supporting a larger number of retirees, a formula for economic stagnation. Already more than 1 in 7 employees in Japan are over the age of 65. a record 9.14 million elderly who are still in the workforce out of necessity or perhaps desire. The roots of this crisis are a tangled web of economic pain and shifting cultural norms. For young generations, the dream of starting a family is increasingly colliding with a harsh reality. Stagnant wages are a huge factor. An average person in their 20s might only make between $17,000 and $20,000 a year, an income that has barely budged in a decade while the cost of living soars. Beyond just money, there's a deep-seated cultural challenge. Japan's demanding work culture makes it incredibly difficult to balance a career and a family. And while more women have entered the workforce, traditional gender roles often persist, placing a heavy burden on mothers. As a result, marriage itself is on the decline. In 2023, the number of marriages dropped below 500,000 for the first time in 90 years. And with births outside of marriage being very culturally rare in Japan, this decline directly translates to a decline in births. The government is not blind to the crisis. They've called it a silent emergency, and they are scrambling for solutions. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has made it a central pillar of his agenda, declaring that the next 6 years are the last chance to reverse the trend. And Japan has earmarked 3.5 trillion yen, about $23 billion annually, to double childcare spending by the early 2030s. They're offering cash bonuses for babies and funding for things like dating services and even epidurals to ease the cost of childbirth. To address the immediate labor shortages, Japan is slowly opening its doors to more foreign workers. The foreign resident population has now topped 3.8 million in 2025, the highest in Japan's history. The government aims to bring in up to 800,000 more workers over the next 5 years to fill in gaps in industries like healthcare and construction. But this is seen as, at most, a bandage, not a cure for the underlying demographic virus affecting the nation. So, what does the future hold for a vanishing Japan? The projections are grim. By 2050, the population is expected to fall to about 104 million. The United Nations predicts that by the end of the century, Japan's population could be as low as 77 million. That's a loss of nearly 50 million people. And quite frankly, the UN projections, if anything, are overly optimistic. That number may wind up being far less than anyone realizes. Look at Japan's births. Look at the slope that the UN models out versus what has been happening in reality, and you will see a tremendous disparity.
So I'm adding this in after editing. So let's look at these slopes, okay? Like if we look at from the 1970s, it's going down pretty steeply. It slows down after the 1980s. 1990s were a relatively strong economic decade. Their births were relatively stable. If we look at it from about 2010 on, there's a clear downward trend. But here's the crazy part, okay? These projections are from the UN from 2024. And if you look at the projections, they actually were assuming that after 2023, that births in Japan would go up to about 789,000. That is not what happened at all. In fact, they were at 750,000, and then in 2024, they went down to 688,000. So the UN doesn't project that number until 2054. What this means is that the UN projections in 2024, they don't predict that Japan's births would go under 686,000 until 2054. We're talking about 29 years here they were off. And it's not as if they made the projection in the year 2000. This was a projection from 2024. And we can see there's a very clear, fast and steep downward slope. But somehow their projections are suddenly flatlining. This is why you can't trust their long-term population numbers, because it's completely over-optimistic for countries like Japan that have seen such dramatic and steep declines in their births.
But perhaps the question isn't just about how to stop the decline, but how to manage it. Some experts argue that Japan should focus on becoming a master of a smaller, older society. This means investing heavily in robotics and automation to solve labor shortages. The government has already allocated hundreds of millions to develop the industry. And part of it may mean redesigning cities and social infrastructure for an older population, creating a first mover advantage in the technology and services of a grayer and far older world. The Japan we know that was once a powerhouse built on a growing youthful population in the 20th century is no more. The Japan of the 21st century will be forged in the crucible of this demographic decline. Its success or failure will not just determine its own fate, but it will serve as a blueprint or a warning for dozens of other countries, from Italy to South Korea to China to the US to virtually every continent in this world outside of Africa, who are walking down this same path of population decline. The world is watching, and the quiet, fading heartbeat of Japan is a sound we should all be listening to. So how do you see Japan's future playing out? Are they headed for a complete collapse, or is their decline sustainable? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please consider liking and subscribing. This has been Blinded by Logic. Thanks for watching.